She went into the nursing home with 2 arms and 2 legs. She came out of the nursing home with 2 arms and 1 leg. Your mom had diabetes, like millions of people live with every single day. She had her toes. She had her foot. And then there was a sore that you were told by the nursing home is nothing to be concerned about. Then it was a bandage. Then it was an infection. And then a surgeon was telling you that to save her life, they had to take her leg. And you're standing there asking, how could this happen? How does a person lose a leg inside of a place whose entire job was to take care of her? Here's the question that you should be asking yourself right now. How does a tiny sore on a diabetic person's foot turn into an amputation when she was supposedly being checked and cared for every single day? She had small sores before, but you made sure that it received proper care and treatment and it healed up. No problem. But when that small sore happened at the nursing home, the supposed experts in providing care, she ends up losing her leg. How does that happen? My name is David Terry. I've spent 25 years handling nursing home abuse and neglect cases. And I'll tell you this, diabetic amputation cases are some of the hardest ones to sit with because they are some of the most preventable issues. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how a tiny sore becomes a lost leg, why diabetes makes it so dangerous, and the one simple thing that a nursing home is supposed to do every single day that should have caught it. Now, once you understand the chain, you'll see why these cases should never happen. Now, to understand how this happens, you have to understand 2 things that diabetes does to the feet. And FYI, this is just basic nursing care that everyone on the nursing staff at the nursing home should know about. The first is nerve damage. Diabetes damages the nerves, especially in the feet. It's called neuropathy. And what that means is your mother may not be able to feel a sore that is forming on her foot. A pebble in her shoe, a blister, a spot that's rubbed raw, things that would make you or me wince and adjust, she may not feel those at all. The warning system, the pain that we would normally feel that tells a person that something's wrong, that's just switched off. The second is circulation. Now, diabetes tends to choke off blood flow, especially in a person's feet. Less circulation means less oxygen and fewer of the things that the body uses to heal. A small wound that would close in a few days on a healthy person, for someone with diabetes, it can sit there and it can be open for weeks. And instead of healing, it gets worse. Now put those 2 things together. She can't feel the wound, so she doesn't protect the wound. Her body cannot heal the wound, so it grows. And that's the trap. A tiny sore that she never felt, that her body couldn't close, quietly turns into a bigger problem. Now here's what happens if nobody catches it. That open wound gets infected. That infection spreads into the tissue, and then that infection spreads into the bone. And once it's in the bone and the blood flow is too poor to fight it, the only way to stop this infection from killing her is to amputate the leg. That's the chain of events. From a sore to an ulcer to infection to bone to amputation. Every single link in that chain takes time, often days or even weeks. So what does that mean? It means that there were days and weeks where someone could have spotted the problem and stopped it. This is the part that makes these cases so sad because the standard of care is not complicated or expensive. For a diabetic resident, staff are supposed to check the feet. It's just that simple. Every single day, look at the resident's feet. Look at the tops of the feet. Look at the soles of the feet. Look in between the toes. Look at the heels. Because the resident can't feel the problem, somebody else has to be their eyes. They have to look for problems. And they're supposed to keep the feet clean and dry and make sure that the resident's shoes and socks fit and aren't causing any pressure or rubbing. They're supposed to manage her blood sugar, and the moment that they see a sore on her foot, they're supposed to get it treated and get a wound care or podiatry referral right away. A facility caring for a diabetic resident should be documenting foot checks regularly. So when I get a case like this, I always ask for those records. Is there a record of someone looking at her feet, examining her feet day after day? Now, I can tell you from experience, that answer is usually no. Typically what I see is a long blank stretch in the chart. and then suddenly a note about a large infected wound that apparently appeared out of nowhere. Well, look, that's nonsense, right? Because wounds like that do not just appear out of nowhere. They grow slowly in plain sight on a foot that nobody was checking. That gap between the daily foot checks that should exist and the silence in the chart, that's the difference between, hey, we caught it early and we got it resolved. Here's how these charts typically read. There's an admission note that clearly says the resident's diabetic with a high risk for skin breakdown. And then for weeks, nothing about her feet at all. And then one day, a single entry about a large, foul, infected wound described as if it just appeared overnight. It likely didn't just appear overnight. It was there the whole time, but they were ignoring it. Why? Because they're often too short-staffed, and sometimes the staff that they do have is poorly trained. Most residents, they only get a bath maybe 5 to 7 times a month, and that's if they're lucky. Well, if they're not getting bathed, employees certainly aren't examining their feet every single day. So let me tell you what good care actually looks like. In a facility that's doing it right, somebody is looking at a diabetic resident's bare feet every single day. They're looking at the tops, the soles, the heels, and especially in between the toes, which is where many skin breakdowns start. They will try to keep the resident's feet clean and dry. They make sure that her shoes fit and that they aren't rubbing anywhere. They try to keep her blood sugar under control because high blood sugar feeds infection and it slows healing. And if she already has a wound, they offload that pressure with special footwear or padding because you just cannot heal a wound that has continuous pressure. None of that care should be considered above and beyond. It's a few minutes of attention every single day, and that is just basic nursing care. Now let's talk about what you should do when you visit. You can catch much of this yourself if you know what to look for. You want to check her feet, and if you see something like a reddened spot or a small blister or a callus that looks kind of angry, then you may see something like a sore with some drainage. There may be some other danger signs like swelling or warmth or the skin turning dark or dusty. And then there might be a smell. And look, a smell coming off a wound probably means infection. Maybe the resident has started to run a fever. Maybe her blood sugar has suddenly become difficult to control for no obvious reason. And that, by the way, is sometimes the first clue that you have when an infection is brewing somewhere. So when you visit, don't just ask, hey, how you doing? Ask to see her feet. Examine them every single time you're there. And if something doesn't smell right, literally, make sure that the nursing home knows about it and ask what they're going to do to solve that problem. So what do you do if this is your loved one? First, if your loved one is diabetic and still in a facility, ask the staff directly. Who checks her feet? How often do you check her feet? And where is it written down? And then look at her feet yourself, like I just talked about, every single visit. Second, if an amputation or a serious foot wound has already happened, get the records. Get the foot and skin assessments, the wound notes, and the nursing notes for the weeks before anyone documented a problem. And look for the daily checks. You'll likely find an absence of daily checks. Third, if those checks are missing, if a wound was allowed to grow in silence, you need to talk to a lawyer who handles nursing home cases in your state. A preventable amputation is very often a real case, and I'm happy to talk with you. You can reach our office at 314-878-9797. Look, losing a leg should never be the price of living in a place that promised to care for the resident. Preventing the loss of a limb is often very simple. It's just looking at her feet every single day and reacting when something's wrong. And in fact, it's so simple that when it doesn't happen, that tells you something major about the nursing home. It tells you nobody was really watching, and that's a major problem. If this video helped you to understand what happened in the context of a diabetic foot wound, go back and watch my video on how to know whether you actually have a nursing home case, because everything I just showed you, the chain of events, the staffing requirements, the records, the gap in the chart, the supervision, the paying attention, that's exactly how these cases are built and proven. So go watch that video, and I'll see you over there.